If you've seen this video, then you know how to start a fire. At least that was my intent when I made it. I've gotten some feedback from one of my viewers. He's stuck next to some swan ships that he's trying to vandalize and he can't get them lit on fire. So I am going to provide more detailed instructions. The next challenge is to redo this video with more details. The first one up is my kitchen torch. It's pretty simple. You push the button in, fire comes out on this end. So what's going on inside of it? First, I have this can of butane, which is a liquid. You can hear it shaking maybe. I put that inside of the torch. It's now gas inside of here. Can't hear it shaking. When I push this button in a little bit, you can hear that the gas comes out. So you can move, see how it moves the thing? Gas is coming out. When you push it in all the way, fire comes out. Cut. Now what lit that gas on fire is, I'm actually not sure. This wasn't a great one to start out with. It's possibly a flint and steel. It's possibly compression of piezoelectric crystals, according to the internet. I actually used this, so I'm not going to break it open to find out which one. Hope that helped. Let's go on to the next one. Now if you want to start a fire with a match, you don't need to do that flicking motion. That's just for style points. A simple swiping motion is sufficient. Now what goes on in that swipe is, first there's friction. Just like giving someone an Indian burn or going like this, creates friction which creates heat. Next, that heat reacts with the red phosphorus that's on this striking surface. That's got a low ignition temperature, so that friction is enough to ignite it. It doesn't catch this whole box on fire because it's catching the sulfur and stuff on the match instead. The match has got sulfur, potassium chlorate, oxidizing agent, all kinds of words like that, and it's also made out of wood, so that's why it burns. For the stove, we need to start outside with this thing. This is a gas collector. Pennsylvania does a lot of fracking, so there's a lot of natural gas coming up out of the ground. This is going to collect it and pump it into the house. I might do a video on backyard fracking later. So the gas gets collected, goes inside. Now inside with the stove, I'm going to remove the grate so that you can see what's happening a little bit better. Actually give you this angle over here. Okay, when I turn the knob, two things are going to happen. One is that flammable gas is going to come out. And two is an electrical spark is going to start right here, which is going to catch that gas on fire. The spark's also over there. We'll zoom in on that so that there's no gas in the way. It's a real small spark, but that's all it takes to trigger the gas. And that's just an electric arc. Similar to if you were jump starting a car and doing it wrong, you would see a light like that. Next we have a battery with steel wool. The way this works is the steel wool connects the positive and negative terminals of the battery. All the electrons in the battery start flowing through it untethered in a free fall, which heats up the steel wool. Steel wool gets to 700 degrees and then starts to transform. The iron in it turns into iron oxide, reacting with the oxygen in the air, which makes all those sparks. And it sort of jumps around, triggering different things, and that's just it turning into iron oxide because it was hot. You could do the same thing with a lighter. The fact that it was triggered from the electrons doesn't matter. All it matters is when it gets hot, it does that. And to actually get the flame, I put some lint in the middle of it. This does not turn into iron oxide because it's made out of t-shirts, not iron. But it does catch on fire when it gets hot. So, cut. A lighter is probably the one you're most familiar with. Again, we have a liquid inside of it. See if I can get this to focus. Liquid that when you pull this down, turns into a gas. If you open this up, which is usually really easy to do with cheap ones, you can see a little more. This is what you spin, this, and that's going to flick down there. There's a little piece of flint. So that steel rubbing against flint is what makes a spark. The spark is what's going to ignite our liquid turned gas turned fire. Another thing you're going to want to look at is this right here is the control gauge. This controls how much gas comes out of it. So we can light it and then spin this, and the flame gets bigger or smaller based on how this is spun. So that is why the flame was so big in my video, was I spun it all the way to the right. I don't feel like recreating a fire. Coals are hot, but when there's no oxygen, coals don't burn. Adding oxygen made it burn. For this one, we're going to take sugar, which you can buy at your local grocery store. And we're going to mix it with potassium permanganate, which you probably can't buy at your local grocery store. The potassium permanganate is a strong oxidizer. So it's going to oxidize the sugar, which is going to allow it to catch on fire if you apply some friction to it. Now it's well mixed, and I'm going to do a nice frictiony strikes on it. See if we can get it going.
You got a dry piece of wood, man?
Smells really bad, but that's how you do it. For this one, I used a bag of magnesium flakes, cut up real fine. Magnesium is a metal with a very low ignition temperature. It's only like 800 degrees is all it takes before it catches on fire. So when an angle grinder is applied to metal, small bits of metal shoot out at a very high temperature. And when you do this with steel, they oxidize and they glow and they look like sparks. That's caused obviously by the inhomogeneous distribution of carbon inside of them. But what's important to us is it's hot and it's going to touch this, which lights on fire when it gets hot, which is going to create fire. Fire. The sun is very hot, and when it looks at something, that heat radiates off of it, and you feel it. Which is why I feel heat right now in my hands in the sunlight, but not when it's in the shadow. However, it's not enough heat for my hand to light on fire, but if we magnify that heat, this magnifying glass takes up this much space. So there's this much sunlight that usually hits this much area. But we magnify it down into a single point. As you can see, it makes a very bright dot because all the sun is going right here. And when I put something in front of it, because I don't want to burn down my apartment, we can burn newspaper with it because the sun's looking at it. And that's how that works. The sun is hot. Got it? Right there I do see a thin beam of smoke, but this is super slow, so I'm tired of waiting. But that's how that works. For this one, I got my stove really dirty, then I turned this on, then I put this pan on, and I put some olive oil in it. I was hoping that the olive oil would heat up and then spontaneously combust when I took the lid off, because that's how you start an oil fire. But it didn't work, so I'm not going to redo it since it didn't work. And I guess oil fires aren't a real thing. For this one, I crumpled up some newspaper into big old balls, and underneath of it all, I put a lit tea light candle. And hopefully I don't need to explain the physics of that. By now, you should have a pretty good idea of how to start a fire, so you know how this one worked, how all of them worked. Challenge complete.